Hi, this is Mickey Ferrugiaro, and this is the video class that goes along with my tutorial for the Celebration needle case. This is a really fun tutorial, lots of fun to make, lots of colors to use. You can use up scrap beads or to make your own colorways. Lots of fun, different layers to work on. There's a little bit of right angle weave, but nothing to scare you. My step-by-step video shows you exactly what to do. So let's go and get started. I've strung 36 of my color D beads onto my thread, and now I'm going to make them into a ring going through the first bead again. And that gives us our ring. Now we're going to leave a long tail thread on this just because I'm going to use it later rather than have to add thread in. And I'm going to work my first row in D beads. So just in peyote stitch, which this will be tubular peyote stitch because we're working in the round. And I'm just going to work my 18 beads. Always tricky getting this first row done. Nice short rows with 18 beads. It tends to grow very, very quickly once we get going. And you probably notice that the longer thread you have, the longer it takes. The shorter thread, the faster you go. So in the beginning, it always takes a bit longer to get around. Almost there. Sometimes you just have to fight with the beads to make sure that the right one stands up for you. And our last one, and we're going to step up. So we're going through our bead and then we're stepping up through the first one of that row. Okay, so we have our little ring. We're now going to slide that onto the base of our needle case. Make sure that we've got our upside, our thread going up. There we go. All our threads tight so it sits nicely. You're going to be able to slide this a little bit, which is good because it's easier to work, you know, if you can keep it in the center rather than if you're trying to drop off the edge all the time. Okay, so that's our first 3 rows and we're already onto our bobbin. Okay, we're going to start row 4. We have a very simple pattern for this. It's really nice and easy, nice start points and finishes and everything else. It's a simple dot pattern. And we're going to start it with one of our C beads, which for me is the yellow. And then I'm going to work 2 in my D beads. And back to 1 in my yellow. So that's all it is. The pattern is 1 yellow, 2 blue. Okay, so you're going to work that, and then the next 2 rows you will work just in the D beads, the blue beads. So we'll come back after that and see where we're at, and we'll slide this down and make sure we're getting it in the right place. Okay, so work this row and 2 plain ones, and I'll see you back here. Okay, so here you can see row 4, which was a spotted row, and then I worked 2 plain rows, and then the miracle of it all is it puts you right back in the spot to start with a yellow again. Okay, so then you do your yellow, your two blues, your yellow, and you can see that yellow sits right in the middle of those two yellows. Those 3 rows are your pattern. A spotted row, 2 plain rows, spotted row, 2 plain rows. And you'll continue like that for a total of 36 rows. Okay, then we'll come back and we'll put our bead on the end. Here we are with 36 rows. I have threaded my tail thread, so I've got a needle on my tail thread, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to work a few rows of black and white. And for our first row we're going to work in black. So here we go. And what we're going to do into the black beads, we're going to attach our large bead. So once we've got this row done, we will attach our large 40mm bead that's going to make the nice bottom of the case. So just working around. Oh, there we go, catching our threads. Okay, so once I have my 18 beads around, we're almost there. Okay, so as we step up through the first bead of that row, this is when we're going to add our yellow bead, and this is why this needs to slide, because we're going to put our yellow bead in, we're going to go through it, and then directly across, so you can count your beads if you like, or you can just pull it and see where we go. And you're just going to try not to lose it off the needle holder, and we're just going to work our way back through that bead. So that's the first bead. So we've gone across, attached it, and we're just doing it at that level. Now you can see the hole at this point, which is why we're going to work a few more rows. Okay, so we're going to work our next row in white so that we get that nice black and white stripey. And I'm going to work a total of 5 rows. So I'll have 3 blacks and 2 whites. So alternating our rows, finishing with a black. So I'll come back when that's done and you'll see that hole will disappear. So there we are. It's got a nice little edging on it. Those black and white stripes finish it nicely with the yellow bead, all in case, no hole visible. So I've re-threaded my needle with my working thread where we finished off on the turquoise, and I've worked a row in my C beads, and here's the last stitch, and I'm not going to step up on it. So we're not going to step up on this row, and that's because we're going to work a second row 37. Now these beads will lay on top, and we're going to work that in our E beads. So they're going to end up on top of those yellow beads. And this is just so that it's the base row for our second layer, and it's much easier to put it on now than it is to put it on later. So we're going to work that around. So I'll come back at the end of this row and then we'll continue. Okay, so here I've added those beads. You can see how they're sitting on top. And on the step up, you're actually now going to step up through that yellow bead. So if we can get our needle in there, there we go. And we're going to work another row in our yellow. So it's nice and easy to work into. Those beads don't really get in the way, and it saves us such a hassle from doing them later. They are so difficult to put on later. Okay, so I'm going to work this row, and then the next one, so this is row 38, and I'm going to work row 39, all solidly in these yellow beads, and then we'll add some spots. So row 40 has us back working on our spots again, and so we're back into our spot pattern. So we're going to work one row with the spots, and then 2 plain, and a spot, 2 plain. So keep going until you've got to row 79, okay? And I will meet you back for row 80. So here I've worked up to row 79, which is in the yellow, and I've worked row 80 where I changed colour into the red, and I did not step up at the end of this row because we're going to put another row on for working our second layer. So just as we did before, we're going straight into those yellow beads so that these blacks will sit on top of those red beads. So this is the second row 80 that we're doing. Okay, so once you finish this row, you're just going to step back into the reds and work in the in red beads with the yellow spots. And once we get up to this little divot in the needle case, we're actually going to use some 15s to sink in there, and it really holds the needle case together so it doesn't slide. Not that it's sliding, but if you do have a if your beads have got maybe a heavy finish on it sometimes, or your tension's loose, then that may be cause some slippage. So we're going to use this divot here just to cinch our beads in. Okay, so we'll come back to do that. So here I am, having finished row 97, and now it's time to put in the little 15s that are going to cinch the beading up into this groove. And you'll see working a couple of rows of these, and then we'll go back to 11s. But you'll see how it just cinches it up into that little groove. You can see it's beginning to curl in there. Okay, so I'm going to work the 2 rows. I'll come back and show you, and then we'll start working a larger row again. So you can see how nice and snug that is in now. It's just really nice curve in there. Now we're going to bring it back out, because we're going to work one more row with our spots, and all working in the 11 delicas. And then we will work one round just in the red delicas. Then we'll finish off with a row of the 15s, which will cinch. So I get my lid off here. That's a stiff one. Once I've worked these rows, then the last row with the 15s is going to cinch just over this edging, just to tie it all in. But you'll see that your beads will not slide at all now with this those couple of rows of 15s. Okay, so just finish up. That's just nice and easy. One spotted row, one plain row, and one row in our little 15s. And we'll be ready to work the second layer. So when it starts to get fun. And here we are with stage 1 complete. So the first layer all done. We have our beads in place for our second layer, and that's what we will be doing next. We're going to work on this top layer first. We'll be working down and then up. Okay, so that's up next. So here we are ready to work on the second layer, and we're starting with this top section with the black beads, and I've woven a thread so that it exits one of those black beads, and from there we're going to work downwards. So we're going to be working towards the base of the needle case, and we're going to work in 2 stitches in the black, and then the third stitch you're going to add 2 of the blacks into that stitch, and that's what we're going to work all the way around. And this does the increase so that it sits on top of the beads. Obviously it's got to be more beads than around the actual needle case itself. So these extra beads we're putting in on every third stitch will give us exactly what we need. So here we are at the end of row 1. I've stepped up, and our next row we're going to alternate some black and whites. So we're going to start with a black bead, and you've just got 1 bead per stitch this round. So we're going to work 1 black, and then I'm going to work 2 of the white beads. And when you come to the 2 beads, you're going to treat them as one, so you're going to go through both of them. Here's our 2 whites and our black. So that's what you're going to do all the way around. Come into our 2, go through our 2 beads as one, and so you can see you're getting a little bit more of a gap here with the 2 beads, and that will work out perfectly. Okay, so work this round, we'll come back and do the next one. Here we are at the end of row 2. I've stepped up, and now on to row 3. Row 3 we're going to work 1 of our blacks, and then we're going to put 2 white beads above the 2 black beads. So that gap is going to now have 2 whites in it. Okay, so then you're doing 2 stitches in black, and you're back to putting the 2 whites over the 2 blacks. So that's how it's going to look. Okay, so this is going to be a nice little scallop edging right here. So we'll come back and do the next row. Okay, here we are after stepping up after row 3. On row 4 we're going to start some scalloping. So we're going to work in the black beads, and we're going to work 2 stitches, and then we're going to skip a stitch. So where you've got these 3 blacks, you're going to skip that middle where you would have put a bead in there. We're going to skip it, and then we're going to work our blacks, and that's all that is all the way around. Through there, skip the next stitch. Nice and easy. And of course that's the point of our scallop that we're going to do. You're just skipping, going through those 2 beads. Nice and easy. Yeah, and skip a stitch. Two black and skip that stitch. Okay, and our step up on this one, we're going to be going through the 3 beads. So like you do your skip, but you're going to step up 2. Okay, and for our next row, we're just going to add the 2 blacks on top of the 2 whites, and then we're going to weave through. So if we go down 2, so I'm adding 2 blacks and I'm going down 2 blacks. Then I'm going to do my skip, and now I'm skipping up 3 beads. As simple as that. Down 2, and up 3. Add 2. Oh, down 2. Remember that. Down 2 and up 3. Up those 3. Nice fast rows this way. Down 2 again. And up the 3. Just gives us like a bunting type of scallop here. And on our last, we're going to skip down, and you can actually skip all the way through. Maybe we'll go to 4 beads, because we're going to skip right the way down to end up at the top. Okay, so we skipped all the way up through, so they're now coming out the top. We have our nice little black and white scalloping, and now we're going to work on coming out of the same actually base beads. These are the base beads, and now we're going to work upwards. Okay, so here I've worked row 6, which is our first row going upwards, and I've done it all in white. You can see that we've got 2 beads over the 2 beads, and it's really simple. The next few rows, you're basically going to work 2 rows of the white. So I've done 1 row, which was with the 2 beads in. This row is just single beads in each stitch, and then I'm going to work 2 rows in black, which will be the same kind of rows as the white. There'll be 2 beads in 1 row and then single beads in the next row, and then we'll work 4 in our turquoisey blue, this blue here, and then we'll finish off with a row in black. So nice and simple. I don't have to show you this. It's a bit like watching paint dry. So it's as simple as that. I'll be doing my 2 rows in white here, then 2 rows in black, 4 rows in blue, and then 1 row in black. And I'll come back and show you how that looks. Here we are with the top finished. So you can see I had my 2 rows of white, my 2 rows of black, 4 rows of the blue, and finishing with 1 row of the black. I've woven my thread in securely and trimmed off the excess. And that section is complete. So now we're going to move down to this bottom section. And I've woven my thread to come out of that the bead on the same. And I'm going to line these 2 beads up. So if I'm following this down, this is the bead I'm going to put the 2 in, because we got to do the same thing around here. So we're going to start with our black bead, and we're going to work our 2, and then we're going to put the 2 blacks in the next stitch. It's just the same as you did for the top section, just to get that number of beads. And on this we're going to be doing stripes, which means that we'll be switching colors for each row. Okay, so we're going to work around there, and then we're going to be working our next row in white. We'll come back to that. Okay, so I've stepped up after the first row, and now my second row is in white. And because we're alternating rows, the white rows will always be the row without the 2 beads. I'll just be in a single bead per stitch. And this will give us a broader stripe. Every 3rd stripe there, every 3rd black stripe will be a wider one. And that's all there is to it. So your black rounds will be black, black, 2, or, you know, if you can remember, because as your tubular, your first stitch will move around. So just know that you're putting a single bead over a single bead and a double over a double. Okay, and you're going to work that for a few rows. We'll come back after you've done about 1/2 inch of it. Okay, so here I have worked about 1/2 inch. It's 17 rows, and I'm going to work row 18. Now, row 18 would be a white row. And so we're going to work in white, but this center white stripe, we're going to put a black bead in because we're going to start a little scalloping on this side. Okay, so on the regular round then, it's 2 whites and 1 black. You can see that black falls right on that 3rd line. Okay, so work that one. 2 whites, 1 black, and we'll come back for the next row. So there's row 18 in, and row 19 is just a regular black row, just as you've been doing. So you've got 2 stitches of black and then 1 with the 2 beads in. We're just getting this set up to do our skip stitches. Okay, so work that one. We'll come back and just finish up this little bit of scalloping on the edge. So here we are on the last row, and you can see this is where we're going to skip a stitch. This is where that black one is on the white line, and you're just going to skip up through there. And this row is nice and easy because we're just going to add the 2 blacks and then skip a stitch. And it's going to give us kind of like a different kind of jaggedy type scallop on the edge. Just something a little bit different. And that, of course, is the bottom of this row complete. Next we'll be working on the section that goes up. Okay, but it looks like I'm going to have to join another thread in to do that. So I'm going to finish this row, and then we'll come back. I'll have woven in a thread so that I can start my top section. Okay, so we finished our edging. I wove my thread in and trimmed off the excess. This is our nice little stripy barcode down there. And I've woven my thread in to exit the purple beads, which are our baseline beads. And I now have to work 17 rows in the purple. So it's just all the same. So you're going to have your 1 row here where your repeat is a purple, and then 2 over the doubles and 1 over the singles. And you repeat that around. If you don't want to think about that, just think when you get to the 2 beads, you put 2 beads over them. Other than that, just regular peyote. Okay, so 17 rows, and I'll meet you back to add in our base row for the 3rd layer. So here I am after working my 16 purple rows, and I haven't stepped up on this row at the end of the row because I want to work another row 16 into row 15, and that is going to be done in the red beads. So just as we did before, to put in a base row for our 3rd layer. And once I've done this, I'm going to go back, I'm going to step back up into the purple. Okay, after stepping up back into the purple, I have worked rows 17 through 20, continuing that plain purple, and now we're going to start adding the spots. So for this row, it's nice and easy. You're going to put purples in the single gaps where you've got a single bead, and lime green over the doubles. So that's all there is for this row. Okay, so our next row, we're going to work 1 purple and then 2 of our green beads that are going to sit at the side of the 2 we've already got in. There we go. And our 1 purple. Two greens. purple. Nice and easy, growing those spots. This row and the last row, you're going to repeat once more. And then you will finish with one of these rows. So if you think of this as a row 1 and row 2, you'll repeat row 1, row 2, row 1. Okay? And then you'll have your spots done, and we'll come back to start working on some scalloping. So here we are with our spots all nice and round. And we're going to work 2 rows now just in the purple. So you'll be doing one that's just the 1 bead per stitch, and then you'll have a row where it's 1, 1, and then 2. Okay, so we'll come back after that one and be introducing another colour for our scalloping, because we're going to do it in a different colour, just to be different. Okay, so now we've done our 2 rows to enclose those spots. We're going to bring in our edging colour, and that's going to go right in the centre between the spots. So on this one I'm using a nice bright turquoise. So that'll give you 1 turquoise, 2 purples, and that's the pattern for the way around. Next row we're going to sit turquoise at the side of our turquoises, and that 2 bead gap is going to be filled with the purple. So a turquoise bead at each side of the turquoise, and 2 purples in that gap. All the way around. We're nearly finished with this section. Okay, now we're on to a skip row. So we're going to add our turquoise on each side, and then we're going to skip that those 2 turquoise there. So that next turquoise stitch, we're going to skip it. Turquoise on each side of the 2, and then skip stitch. So at the end of this row, the step up is through those 3 beads. The 2 that you were going to do for the skip stitch and the 1 for the step up. The last row, I'm sure you can guess, is just adding our 2 beads. We're going to go down 2 and step up through 3. And this will complete this second layer. Okay, so once you've got that done, you can weave in your thread, or if you still got a long thread left and you want to use it, just weave it back down through your beads so that we're exiting on the base row for the 3rd layer. And layer 3 starts very differently. It's going to be a row of right angle weave, and it's going to be a little bit different in as much as we're going to have 1 bead in the center, here, this 1 bead, and then we're going to have 2 beads on the outside. It'll sit at a right angle. Okay, so coming out of the bead, you're going to add 4 beads, and you're going to come back through to make your circle, make your raw stitch. I have thread caught here. Okay, so here you can see I'm going to have 2 beads. Get my needle through there. I'm going to have 2 beads that sit on the outside. Try and do this and pull it so you can see. Okay, so you can see our center bead, our 2 beads that sit on the different angle, and then our 2 beads on the outside. So that's what each stitch is going to look like. So as we've done stitch 1, we're just going to go up the side bead, or center bead that sits in between the 2 outer edges, and then we're going to add 3 beads, and every stitch will be 3 beads after this till we join them up. And so we're going to add our 3 beads, come through the base bead, the base row bead, and we're going to come up that side bead again to complete the stitch. Okay, then we step up by going through the 2 on the outside, the center bead that's on the angle, and through the next base bead. Okay, so that's stitch 2. And with it being right angle weave, it does work where you're going clockwise and counterclockwise. So our next stitch are 3 beads. And we're going to be going the other way. So here we're going to go through that bead of the last stitch and through that base bead. And this is a stitch with the easy step up. You just step up through that first bead. That's the bead that becomes what I call the center beads. Okay, and it's hard to see it right now, but once we are finished and we start our embellishments, you'll see exactly how this works. That's going to be our one side with our base beads at the other side. Okay, so work your stitches until we get to the end, and I'll come and join this last stitch with you. So we work to that bead, we'll finish this one. Okay, so I've worked my right angle weave stitches all the way around. Now I'm going to join this last stitch. I'm going to join this stitch to form our last stitch. So here I need to add the 2 beads that will form this side, go through the side bead, or the center bead of the first stitch, through the base bead, and then through the center bead of the last stitch. And I don't want to step up because right now I'm going to go into doing some embellishments, and that'll show you a lot of how it puts this right angle weave that looks a little bit odd right now. It'll pop it into shape. Okay, and it will also bring it out to sit at a right angle to the beadwork. Okay, so we'll come back to add our embellishment beads. So the center beads that I talked about, that's what we're going to use. So coming out of the center bead, I'm going to cross over, add my fire polish, my 3mm fire polish, and go through the next bead in the same direction, so the thread's coming out on the bottom. And then I'm just going to do the same on the next stitch. Through that center bead, and keep going around. And the more you work, the more you'll see this starts to actually sit out like this. So you can see how those are going to sit at a right angle to our beadwork. Okay, so I'm going to finish these, and don't step up at the end. I'm going to come back and we'll straighten these beads up. You can see they're sitting at an angle right now, and we're going to straighten them up and strengthen the joinings. Okay, so finish this and we'll come right back. Okay, so you can see that it's now standing out on the beadwork, and as I've come through the last stitch, I'm going to turn and go backwards. So it's basically the same thing, and it'll straighten up the embellishment beads. And you want to be going in the opposite side, so you're still going to go from top to bottom, but because you're going in the opposite direction, your threads will sit at either side of the bead that you're going through. You can see the 2 threads coming out and going to either side of the center bead there. And it does straighten up the bead so that instead of the hole going that way, the hole now goes, get in there, goes straight. So that's why we do this. Okay, so through the bead and then down through that center bead again. Okay, so work that around and then we'll come back and we'll start adding some beads in between. Okay, so once you've straightened all your fire polish, go through the fire polish so that you're going through every single one. And then you can cinch it up so it's nice and tight against the beadwork. So once you've cinched those up, just to lock it, go through the 2 red beads that are below the last fire polish you came out of, and basically go back through, and that'll just lock those beads in place. And then we can work our row in yellow beads. Peyote stitch, just going around, and this will help the yellow beads stay on the outside. At the end of adding the yellow beads, you're going to come out through a yellow bead and then go down through the 2 beads that are below the fire polish. Make sure the thread doesn't get caught. And then you're going to work a row into those 2s with red, just so 1 bead per stitch. I'm going to go around that way. Okay, so step up at the end of this row, then we're going to do something a little bit different. Don't get carried on to doing the peyote yet. Okay, so finish this row and step up. For this row, we're going to attach our red beads that we've just added to our yellow beads. So how we're going to do that is we're going to go back through the yellow, and then back through the red and through the 2 beads and through the next red bead that we're going to join to our yellow. So it's like a little ladder stitch that we're adding these 2 together. You can see how it just pulls this whole red base out. And it helps keep those yellow beads on the outside, so our turquoise are tucked in. So go through to the next one. You can see how it's going now, so we want to stop that from happening. So we come through and step to our next red bead. See, that just keeps it all really nice and keeps those turquoise beads tucked in nicely to the needle case. Okay, so work that and then we'll come back and we'll be working on this layer for real. Taking it down. Okay, you can see how nice and solid this band is now. And we're going to start working down. So for the next 3 rows, you're going to work in the red beads. And you'll be working this row, you're going to add 1 red in between the pairs. And then you'll work the pairs, a row of 2 beads in each stitch. And then you'll do another row like this one with just 1 in between. And then we'll come back and start placing some spots. Okay, so 3 rows and I'll be back. Okay, so I've done my 3 rows and you can see that the beads have cinched up quite a lot against the beadwork of the second layer, which is exactly what we want to happen. And now we're going to add the spots, and we're going to add them the same way in every 3rd stitch. So we'll start with a yellow, so two beads of yellow, and then we work 2 stitches with 2 beads of the red. And then time for another spot. In we go, and then 2 red stitches. So work that around and we'll come back for the next row. For the next row, we're going to be working with yellow beads at the side of our 2, red in the middle, and then another yellow. Nice and simple all the way around like that, just so that you've got your 2 yellows at the side of the yellow pair, and then 1 red bead in the middle of the 2 red pairs. And you're going to work, if you count the 2 pair as row 1 and this row as row 2, you'll work another row 1, another row 2 and another row 1 to finish that spot. And we'll come back after that. Once you've finished the spot, we're right in the next position to start another one. This is going to be a little bit smaller spot because you're going to be starting with a single bead rather than a double. And so we're just going to do the same thing. It's 1 yellow bead and 2 red, and back to the yellow. So work that all the way around and we'll come back for the next row. The second row of this spot is a little bit different because we've got the 2 beads at each side. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add 1 yellow and 1 red. Then we'll work a stitch with just red. And then the next stitch is a red and a yellow. So your yellow bead going into the yellow bead. Yellow bead coming out with a red. And then the 2 reds. So work that all the way around. And that is the 2 rows that you'll need for the stitch. So if this is 1 and this is 2, you'll work another 1, 2, and then a 1. And then we'll come back at the end of that spot. So here we are with the second spot completed, and we're ready to add another spot. So this row, we're going to be 2 reds, another 2 reds, and then a stitch in the yellow. And just work that all the way around. And we're basically just going to repeat what we did for this first spot. So work that and I'll come at the end of the spot and we can work on the last bit of scalloping. So after the third spot is done, we're going to work 2 rows purely in the red. So I'm going to work these. And then we'll come back and the next thing that we'll do is a little bit of scalloping so that we can finish this edge off. And then we will be done with the needle case body and we'll just have the lid to do. So 2 rows and we'll be back for some scalloping. For this next row, you're going to have a skip stitch. So you're going to skip this bead right here. So we're right at that spot. So I'm just going to skip this, and it's just a little bit different because you're going through those 2 beads. Okay, and then I'll be working in red, so it'll be 2 beads and then a skip stitch. Just not as easy to go through the 3 beads when you've got 2 beads there. You kind of just have to angle and wiggle a bit more. Okay. So 2 beads and skip stitch all the way around. So here we are for the last row, and I'm sure you've guessed it's just putting those 2 reds into that 2 bead gap there. And then you're going to weave through to the next gap. Almost made it. There we go. Okay, so just weaving through those beads and then adding the 2. See if we can get through. There we go, through 3 at a time there. Okay. So that's all there is to this, and then you can finish your thread securely and trim off the excess because that's the body that is complete now. So when we come back, we'll be making our little top. The first thing you'll notice is that your cap is just a little bit wider than the needle case itself, and so you need 3 more beads to go around it. And how I've done that is I've done in our sections, I've started here so it's nice and easy for you to see. I've done 5 and then a turquoise, 6 turquoise, 5 turquoise, 6 turquoise, 5 turquoise, 6 turquoise. So we've added an extra bead in 3 sections. And let's show you how that works. We're going to join it into a circle by going through the first 2 beads. And that puts us in a good place for this. Okay, so now we're going to work in red, and we're going to work just regular peyote until we get into the center. So here we've got the 5, and you'll see the difference when we get onto the next one. I'm putting on the section with the 6 beads in. We're going to work 1, and then we'll have 2 beads in the center stitch. So you're going to go over 2 beads and put 2 beads on top so that it looks like that. Okay? And then you'll just work around. So the next section is a 5, and you'll see the difference once I've got this done. So you can see here we've got 3 stitches, 1, a double and 1, and then on the next section we've just got the 3 stitches, no double. And so you'll work that all the way around, so you'll have 3 sections with double stitches in them. And then we'll slide it onto our cap and continue. So I'll come back when I've got mine onto the cap. So here we are with it slid on the cap. And now we're just going to continue working in our red. So this row will just have single beads per stitch, treating that 2 as a single bead, and we're just going to work around. I've stepped up after that round, and the next round we're going to add some more spots, and this will be a little bit different because we're going to have to add a double spot. So the way that we're going to do that, we don't want to make a spot any bigger, so we're just going to add a red and a blue into that 2 gap. Means your spot will be a little bit off center, but it's not something to worry too much about. Okay, in the 5 one, it'll just sit in the center. Okay, so this is what we will work, and we work a few more rows of this to cover our cap, and then we'll come back and start some shaping so that it stays on the cap. So we're going to be decreasing to go over here and decreasing so that it stays on here. So here I am after working row 10. I have not stepped up because we're going to work a base row, another row 10 that will lay on top of the beads. This is for our second layer for our cap. So just working in the turquoise beads here, I'm just going to work another row 10 that sits on the top. Okay, so we'll work that, and then I will step down through the red beads again, and then I'll work 1 row in our A beads, which is our little red 15s, and that will close it around the top so that it stays onto the cap. Okay, so here we are with our 15s that have all closed in around our cap. You can see that we can't push the beading off the cap anymore. And we just did 1 bead, one of our 15s in each stitch with 2 over the pairs of beads. And I've stepped up to come out of one of the base beads, and I have a long thread. I'm going to save that for when I want to do the second layer. So now I've threaded my tail end thread. We've got that through the needle, and I'm just going to step up so that we're in our right position. I want to be in the row 1 beads. So here we are, ready to start working so we can close up the top. First off, we need to work on another row in the red, so I'll come back after that and we'll put another spot in. Okay, so this is row 13 and we're ready to start our little spot row. Straight away we're going to need a spot that comes above this one. And then we're going to work 2 of our red beads, 2 stitches in red. And then we come to our next spot and it's on the double beads. And how we did a red and a turquoise last time, this time we're going to do a turquoise and a red. And you OCD people will appreciate that because it adds a little bit of balance. Yes, I have OCD a little bit, so it makes me happier to do that. Okay, so that's how you work the row. And then after this row, we're going to work another row just in the red beads. It'll be 1 bead per stitch. And then we'll come back to start our shaping down so that we're closing in on this top. Okay? Row 15 is done in our 15s. And the first row, we're just going to add 1 bead per stitch. So even over your 2 beads, your bead pairs, we're going to bring that down. It helps on the decrease and it brings us back to our original number of beads. Okay, so work this one around and then we're going to work 1 more row in the 15s, just a straight row of 1 bead per stitch, and then we'll come back and we will change colors. So here we are at the end of row 16. A tip I will give you on working with 15s is if you usually use a 10 needle, step down to an 11 or even a 12 needle, as the finer needles are much better for going through these 15 beads and there's less chance of you breaking your bead. Also, when you're starting a row, when you're going to have to step up through a 15, leave a little bit of loose thread, don't put it in too tight, leave it really loose, just so it sits, because it will make life so much easier for you when you come to do your step up. And here we're going to skip our next stitch, so I've got 1 black in, I'm skipping over the turquoise, the beads that are on top of the turquoise, I'm going to skip that bead and I'm going to work 2 stitches in black and I'm going to skip that 3rd stitch. So this time I'm just going to go straight through those 2 15s. So 1 regular stitch and 1 stitch where I skip the next bead and go through the 2. One and 1 with a skip. And our skip stitch. And now if I go through that 15, you see I can get through that 15 easy because that little bit of thread allows that black bead to get pushed out of the way so I can step up. Otherwise, this is the point where you tend to break your beads. Okay, so that's how we look. Now we're going to work 2 rows, 1 in white and then another 1 in black, just 1 bead per stitch. It's just 12 beads in the round. So you can see now that we have our 3 rows done, our black and white stripe. You'll see that's how you get to see it, just a little bit of detail inside the divot of the cap. Okay, so now we're going to change color and go into our turquoise. And you're just going to work 2 rows in the turquoise. and then we're going to start increasing. So on your second row, a good way to leave lots of space for increasing is every time you add a bead, put your thumb on top so that the beads kind of sit on the outside. So if you just put your thumb down so that they don't fall in, we want them to go out because we're going to be increasing. It's not so important on the first row, but on the second row it really helps to give the space for when you're going to increase. That gives your thread a little bit more leeway for the increase beads. Okay, so this row, another one, and then we'll come back to start the increasing. So here you can see how my beads are leaning out because I put my thumb on top of them. And that's because we have a lot of increasing to do on this row. We're going to increase in every other stitch. So we're going to start putting in 2 beads in the next stitch, and then 1. Then 2 in the next stitch, and then 1. And you can see I'm still keeping my thumb on top because it just helps get a really nice feel when you're doing this, the increases. See, it works really nice and smooth if you do it this way. Okay, so here we go, 2 again. 1. Two on our last one, and then we're going to step up. Now, while we're in this step up position, we're going to add our large yellow bead. So we're going to pop that baby on top, bring our needle through, and then as you lay that down, go through the two beads, the pair of beads at the other side. So right at the other end of the hole, you'll have that. Then you're going to come back again. Don't pull too tight. You don't want your beads to really jump out of position, but we're just lightly holding that bead on. We'll do more to hold it on as we go, but that's just so that we can now keep our tension around our bead. Okay, so our next row is just 1 bead per stitch. And you'll see that this will start to bring the beads up around the yellow bead. See? Just like that. So work this row and then we'll come back for the next one. Okay, you can see it's nicely encasing our bead. And our next row is just 1 bead over the singles and 2 beads over the doubles. Again, keep your thumb on your bead so that you can, gives you a nice way to keep some pressure on it. And we're just working around. And after this row, I'm going to work one more row with just 1 bead per stitch. And then we'll come back and we'll add some fire polish. So here we are after row 25. And row 26, we're going to add our little fire polish. So we're going to add 1 fire polish over the 2 beads, and then one of our turquoise delicas in between. Just alternating that all the way around. And you'll see that our fire polish is going to sit over the hole. That's going to be disguising our hole, and we're going to solidify that on the next round. And our step up is through our fire polish. Okay. And now we're going to add a row of delicas. So there's going to be 2 delicas between each fire polish. And when I'm almost all the way around, when I come through the fire polish where the hole is, I'm going to actually just go back through the hole, through the fire polish on the other side, and then back the hole, through the hole again. Make sure your thread doesn't go on that side, it wants to go on the inside. And then back through that fire polish, and that just makes sure that my beads stay over the hole so I don't see the hole. Okay, and this is our last stitch for this row. And step up, and then we're just going to add our turquoise delica in between the 2 that we have. So we're going to go straight through the delica, the fire polish and the delica, just to give a little point to that beading in the center. You can go all the way through in one step. Nice tug on it to close it all up. And we're back around, and so now we can weave our thread in. And this is a good time that if you see any little gaps or your beads aren't laying correctly, you can go in and just check those and maybe weave your thread so that it closes them up a little bit. If you're a loose weaver, you probably have this happen more than if you're a tight beader, but sometimes it just helps to just pull all those beads together. See, like I want this one to stay exactly on top here. So I'm just going to do like a little ladder stitch on it. Makes him stay in place and lets me close this up so it becomes a bit more even. See? Okay, so I'm going to finish weaving in, and then I'm going to trim the thread. And when we come back, we'll be working on our second layer. Okay, so now we're ready to work the second layer on the top. And it's really a good idea to put it on so that you can make sure when you're doing the lower section that it covers the bead so that your tension isn't too tight. Okay, so you want to have your thread exiting one of the base beads for the second layer right before a section where there's 2 beads, and that means that we'll be in the right place. Okay, so you're going to work 2 beads in the lime green and 1 bead in the turquoise, then 2 in the lime and 1 in the turquoise, all the way around. Okay, and step up at the next row and I'll meet you there. Here I've stepped up after the first row, and the second row is worked in green beads, and it's just 1 bead per stitch. So you're going to treat those pairs of beads as 1, just like we always do. And as you work this is going upwards, and you'll see that the beads are beginning to lay right against the beadwork. So really you've got three rows in green. You're going to work this row, and then you'll work one where you're putting alternating one bead and then two beads. So one over the ones and two over the twos, all in green. And then another row like we're doing now with just a single bead per stitch. So work those 3 rows and we'll come back to add our fire polish. Here we are, I've stepped up after row 4 and we're now ready to add our little fire polish. So over the 2 gap, over the 2 beads, we're adding the fire polish, and then we're going to put a delica in between. Nice and easy. And you see it gives it that like little scalloping in between. Nice little finish to it. And once you've worked this row, weave through your beads so that you're exiting out of one of the base row beads. And then we'll start working on the bottom. Okay, so we have all our fire polished in, and now I've woven my thread down to exit through one of the base beads. And I'm right at the point for 2 of the green beads, and that's what this row is. It is 2 greens in the 2 bead gaps and 1 turquoise in the 1 hole gap. So you're just alternating 1 turquoise, 2 greens. That's all there is to this row. And it's nice to have the top on so that you can see, how the beads are going to sit on top of these beads. We don't want to get them too tight, so you can make sure that your tension is correct as you're working it. Okay, row 6, you're going to be working all in the turquoise. And it's just 1 bead per stitch, treating our pairs as 1 bead all the way around. And then the next row you'll work just as we did on the last row, with 1 turquoise and 2 greens. So I'm going to work this row and the next one, and I'll be back after that. So here we are at the end of row 7. Our spots are complete, and now we have 3 rows to work in our green beads. So the first one will just be single beads, 1 bead per stitch. The next bead will be alternating 1 and 2 beads, and then the third row will be just like this one with 1 bead per stitch. Then we will come back and do our little bit of scalloping. So I'll meet you back here after these 3 rows. So here we are at the end of row 10, and all that's left for us to do is add our little beads that create the scallop. So our scallop, we're going to add 1 bead, the single bead, and then we're going to step up through the 2 beads. That's our skip stitch, and then we step up. So add the 1 bead and go through to skip the next stitch and step up. 1 bead through the next bead and the double bead, step up, 1 bead through the 3, step up, make sure you get through the right bead. And also make sure your tension, you can see it's not quite that snug along the, you can see down here, it's not quite so snug. You can get your needle through around here between the beads of the second layer of the cap and the base of the needle case. That's, we want to be able to get our top on and off. If you've pulled your beads too tight, you might have trouble with that. So that's your little tip there. Okay, so just finishing up our scallops. Step up. Almost around. Almost did all of that without getting a thread caught. A miracle. Okay, so there you go. That's all your scalloping done. And now you can weave your thread in securely. When it's something like this, I like to weave through the last row and then weave it in again securely so that it's done. But that is your celebration needle case. I hope you enjoyed it and that you'll look for some more of my tutorials with video classes. Thanks.